I'm just hearing from Vicky that the video is not showing through, and in order for you to receive the benefit of this, you would really want to see the pictures. And I'm going to find a way to give you the link so that you might watch it on your own. I will copy this into the chat room that everybody can see. And it's a Vimeo a video. And I really encourage you, if you're interested in the mandala as an approach, that you can check this out yourself. But I'm not going to spend more time on it right now because I don't have the technology figured out today for whatever reason. Anyway, it is a video by Stephen Buckby about the mandala. He is considered by me and by many others as to be the world's leading expert on the mandala. He knows more about it than anyone, and he's done countless workshops all around the world teaching people how to use the mandala. And is really, really an interesting guy and very talented at using the mandala in great depth. So if you are interested, please follow up with that. Okay, I'm going to share with you from my own experience the work, how I use the mandala in a different way with one of my clients. And this is a one-on-one session with a client who had come to make some changes in her life. And what we did in this example was that I have a collection of stuffed animals and toys that I use in some of the therapy that I do. And what I did was I invited her to choose a stuffed animal or toy to represent each of her 8 parts of her mandala. And as you can see in this setup, and she sculpted these parts of herself on the coffee table in the office in our counseling center. And you'll see that, for example, this is the intellectual part. This little fox is the intellectual part. And this is a little cat, and it's up here, up high on a binder. And we just use whatever is around to create height and depth and to try to exemplify how these parts are in relation to each other. So this is, I believe this is contextual part. This is the sensual part, this pink flamingo. This monkey represented the physical part, and this tiger, we're going to see what that is after. I can't read it on there, and you'll see the rabbit here is the spiritual part. And if you just notice where she positioned this. Now, I asked the client to put they start doing one at a time. So she would start with the physical part and place the monkey representing her physical part. She placed it in the middle of the table. And then we chose a second one, whatever order it's in, doesn't really matter. But so the sensual one, she put right beside the physical one. So this has a certain meaning for her. And then we ask her to explain why is that sensual one by the physical one. And why is the contextual one way up here behind and above all of the other parts of herself. And look at this intellectual part, which is high up on, it looks like a throne. And actually this scarf is covering up several of the other parts that were almost unknown to her, that she was not in very good communication with the parts of her that were emotional parts and nutritional part. they were hidden from her. So when she had completed the whole picture, and remember there's 8 parts, so you can only see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 are hidden. 2 are hidden under there. Okay, so just try to keep this one picture in your mind, and then I would ask her, what does she think each of these parts is feeling like? What does that part think? What does that part need? What does that part, say the intellectual part, think about the physical part? How do you think the spiritual part feels as it's sitting over there, leaning over the edge of the table? You know, that's a very powerful image that it presents to anybody about how the person's spiritual state is. And even just a complete stranger looking at this picture that the client created would get an image of what it's like to be that person. So I'm going to move on and show you this. So they add one part at a time. So starting with the physical part, as I mentioned, oops. Okay, so the physical part could include, how is the person's health? Do they have any diseases? Are they, have they any kind of physical disability? How is their energy? Are they sleeping well? Okay, so these are some of the questions that you would ask a person to try to understand how their physical condition is. And if any of you are interested in doing this exercise for yourself, you're very welcome to. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. If you have access to toys, or it could be any objects that you could use to represent the 8 parts of yourself, you could create a picture for yourself using objects. That's the experiential nature of the Satir-based therapy that I practice. Another way to do it is you could make a collage. You could take magazines and cut pictures out that would represent each of the 8 parts, and put those pictures in a, you know, like the pieces of pie, 8 pieces of pie that would make a circle. And you could make a collage for yourself to get an idea of who are you? What are your different parts like right now? And so this is a physical, and these are just some of the ideas about the physical that might help you to think about your physical being, your body. You know, how is it? Do you love your body? Do you hate your body? Do you want to hide your body? Do you are you a person who likes to show off your body? Are you athletic? You know, you can just ask yourself a lot of questions to understand the physical part of yourself. The contextual part, this refers to the context that the client exists in. And that could be, do they live alone? Do they live in a family? Do they have family that they don't live with, but that they're connected to? Maybe many people in their family have passed away. Maybe they don't live with their birth family. Maybe they never had any siblings. So that is all part of their family context. What about cultural supports? Do they live in a place where they have support for their from their cultural background? You know, we can think of people in the Yukon, in the First Nation community. Some people are very connected with their cultural supports. They know their language, they know their traditions, and they have ceremony that they can access to help them get through a tough time. And some people are very disconnected from their culture. What about historical context? You think if you're an Israeli person and an Arab person, or an Arab person, and you're living in Israel or the Gaza Strip or any of the Arab countries, and you think of the traditional conflict between those two nationalities. What about if you're a residential school survivor? This provides some kind of context for your life, and it's part of who you are. It's, according to Virginia Satir, only 1/8 of who you are, but it's an important part of who you are. Your geographic context. We're different in the North than people in the South. It's very easy to see when we have a blizzard in the Yukon and life continues and all the schools stay open, and but they have a blizzard in Winnipeg and all the schools shut down in the whole city. Your geographical context is very significant. Are you by the ocean or not? If you're a person who loves the mountains, are you in the mountains, or are you living on the prairies right now? All this is part of the context in which you exist. The economic context is very important. Are we in we're looking at the inflation rates these days and the price of oil and all of this. So life is getting more expensive. This is part of the economic context that we all live in right now. And that may be felt differently for somebody living in Saudi Arabia as it would be in somebody living in Whitehorse, Yukon. What about whether you are in the midst of war or you're in the midst of peace, or a little bit of both? The context for somebody living in the Ukraine right now would be very different from the context of somebody living in Whitehorse, Yukon. If you're rich or poor, that's part of your context. If you have to think about every penny that you spend, or if you're well off and you can just buy anything you want whenever you want it, that's a very different context that you live in. The rural urban. Having just spent some time in Winnipeg, and when I go visit some large cities in the Middle East, I'm very conscious of the different contexts that people live in. In Whitehorse, I live 3 minutes away from my office. In Istanbul, going from where I stay to the institute where I teach, on some days it takes 15 minutes. On other days it takes 2 hours because of the traffic. That is a hugely different context. So I'm just trying to give you some idea of how to think about when you're looking at your own context, what are the important parts of your context? And they could be some of these things, and there's lots more that you might think of as well. And when we go back to the I have to go back here. The look at the context, you see this little, it's hard to see maybe on your screen, but this is the context. This symbolized the context, that little cat. And you see it's at the back of the sculpt that the client did, very up high on a binder, towering over everybody. So for this woman, the context was the most important part of her whole picture, because it was up the highest. It was above everything else. And that was just her reality. And this is something that each person knows for themselves. And when they want to look at who they are, The context is very important, but for some people, it may not be the most important thing. Okay, and this tiger is the interactional part. So this is all about how we interact with other people. How are the client's connections? Their interactions with others. Do they have a lot of conflict with other people, or are they easy to get along with? Do they have conflict with their family members or their spouse? Or they find themselves fighting with people a lot or angry with people? Or do they feel supported? Are they in loving relationships, or are they starved for love? Are their relationships authentic, or do they feel more superficial? How are they feeling about their relationships? Fulfilling or empty? Okay, and I apologize, the slide is a little bit blurry, but the emotional part of this particular client, I lifted the scarf up so you could see it. It was a teddy bear under there, but it was hidden over because the client said, oh, I don't even pay attention. I don't have time for feelings. And the spiritual part we saw on an earlier slide. Whoops, it went too fast there. Yeah, there's the spiritual part. And you can think of how you might feel looking at that when you recognize that that was your spiritual part. It just made me so sad to see that. I looked at it and I thought, wow, that poor spiritual part is all by itself. It's all over there looking down at the floor, must be feeling very discouraged, disconnected from the rest of the person. Can't see where they're going. You can imagine what that meaning might be for the client when they look at that, and for ourselves. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. And then I asked the client, well, if you could wave a magic wand and have everything be the way that you would want it to be, how would these parts be? And this is the picture that she created. This is the sculpture that she created with these same animals. And actually, she chose this coffee or toffee tin for the nutritional part of herself. And it was interesting because that box of Macintosh toffees wasn't really meant to be part of the sculpt, but she chose it. And she said, yeah, I eat a lot of junk food. I eat too much candy. I don't eat a good diet. And she was a busy mother, a person who worked full time outside the home and lived in the country. So it was interesting that she chose that that toffee box to represent her nutritional part. And then you'll see what else you would notice about this future that she could envision, where all her parts were kind of sitting together. They were all equal. Her emotions were not buried under the scarf. Her nutritional needs were not buried under the scarf. And yeah, I don't even see where it is, but the context was not as towering over everybody else. And, because this woman had felt like she was at the mercy of other external things that were going on in her life and didn't have much control over what was going on for herself. So this was the future that she envisioned. So that was what we started to work on one at a time. So how could she get her emotions out from being buried? What did she need to do about her nutritional life that would help her like herself better and be more the person she wanted to be? And how could she get her pay attention to some of her spiritual needs, which she had been ignoring and leaving till last? So I think I'm going to end there, and I'll just show you a nice photo of the swans from out at the Tagish Bridge on the weekend. Um, of course, at this time of year, if we get a chance to go out and see the swans, it's always a symbol of renewal and, you know, positive things coming back, life coming back, the water opening up, the kind of metaphors that spring brings to us. So I was lucky enough to be out there this weekend and really enjoyed seeing the swans, and really felt that way too for myself, that it was kind of a rebirth, kind of an opening up again. So I'm going to end the slideshow there. And Vicki, if you want to stop the